If you chose not to listen to the last chapter, here is a much less descriptive summary. Clara's eyes were overwhelmed by distressing images of devastation and suffering. She saw scenes of people afflicted by a mysterious illness, with guards in hazmat suits eliminating the infected. Parents tried to protect their children who were also affected. As the scenes played, many in the room, including Cynthia, were visibly disturbed. Clara, standing near the largest screen, demanded an explanation from the noble heads, who remained silent. Redford admitted he had expected a rebellion, but not this unimaginable horror. Clara questioned why the Royal Navy hadn't acted sooner if a rebellion was suspected. Now, let's continue with the next part of the story. We only suspected it. We had no solid evidence, and everything pointed more to be a conflict between houses, Redford replied. If something must be praised about what they've done, then it is their containment of information and the manipulation of events to disguise their real intentions for something trivial. That is, until House Vinthe, or rather, the now-deceased Itogl Vintha, couldn't contain his guilt anymore and was ready to reveal the truth. He contacted Lukacs Ishtal and delivered him pieces of information that led us to conclude that a petty squabble was unlikely. The veteran commander sneered at the screen for a few seconds before continuing, every noble present glaring at him while Clara tried to comprehend everything he was revealing. By the time Lukacs discovered the blockades, my fear that houses Akulata, Hulma, and Everblade were preparing to try and strike a successionist coup was laid to rest, replaced by the fear of a commoner revolt snatching those systems away from their control grew. I knew I had to see this matter personally and discover the truth. Clara's head was spinning and she felt dazed, but Milcades placed a hand on her left shoulder, preventing her from tipping to the side. Latching onto his arm for support, her gaze set on the man she loved as family. Why? What was the point of putting such theatrics? Why didn't you tell me anything, Uncle? Why was I sent here in the first place? If what you feared was true, shouldn't my father be present? Redford sighed deeply. My princess, His Majesty, the prince had other more crucial matters to attend to. He thought that, if a rebellion was at play, then the experience gained through witnessing the proceedings and letting you voice your judgment under his authority would do you tremendous good. Sadly, my princess, this is far, far beyond what even I could have conjured in my cruelest imaginary scenarios. He paused for a moment and his expression softened. I chose not to tell you the truth of my mission and intentions, due to your inexperience, Clara. In other words, I'm incompetent, Clara thought, reading through the lines and the unspoken soft insult her uncle had labeled upon her. She should have been angry and outraged at the slight of her honor and dignity, but was he wrong? When had she done anything through her own initiative that wasn't a move to satisfy her own interests? She fulfilled her lessons and learned them well, but hardly put them to practice. I really am an incompetent fool, aren't I? Please, Lord Kalen, listen to us, Tusko Hulma pleaded, finally breaking the silence he and his fellow nobles held. We are loyal to the prince and the principality. What we did, it had to be done. There was no other option. Silence, you curs! Cynthia, now recovered, stepped forth angrily, a sword gripped tightly in her left hand. You attacked the second princess of the Astorian Principality, and yet you claim loyalty? You are already traitors for that act alone. My princess, give the command and their heads shall roll. What does a child know about life? Gawain Akulata retorted angrily. Had you been in our place, you would have done the same to preserve your standing and the honor of your houses. He turned to Redford, pointing a finger. Have our houses not paid more than what the tithe dictates in past years? Coffers and bank accounts were fattened by our labor and prosperity. All that is moot compared to your attempted assault upon an Astor, Redford countered with a snarl, but then closed his eyes and exhaled deeply. But you are correct in one regard. Years prior, you began experiencing an economic boom, and your houses indeed paid their tithes with great additional interest. It is that very reason why it has taken 5 years for us to respond to your precipitous shortcomings in the payment of your tithes. Whatever standing and gravitas you bought have been expended, and now you have sealed your doom. Speak. Who is responsible for this? The Arabians, Natinza Everblade replied after a short moment of silence. Her tone was weak and hurt. They launched a fabricated virus upon several of our worlds through covert assaults. Clara felt anger rise within her chest at the revelation. The Arabian Commonwealth had always been a threat to the Principality since Julius Astor founded it. They were conniving and scheming, and certainly not above using biological warfare. They had done so before, but never so cruelly or to such an extent. She was about to condemn the Arabians when Redford spoke first. "That is a blatant lie," Redford snapped back. "The Fifth Fleet has not reported any unusual movements from the Arabians. No infiltration attempts, no covert operations, no pirate incursions coming from their space. I will admit that the possibility stands for some agents to slip past our intelligence forces, but why would they attack low-tech worlds from across the Principality? That aside, I doubt that even the Arabians could unleash something so terrible upon anyone. Tell us the truth." Clara was both astonished by Redford's words and angered by the attempt at manipulation Natinza had performed. With her veil uncovered, she didn't bother to hide her frustration as her mind raced in search of an answer. For a moment, she wondered how many of them would draw a concealed weapon in a vain attempt to fight back. Several seconds passed, and no other answer came. "Very well. You've brought this upon yourself. Cynthia, your princess needs you," Redford ordered and glared at the nobles. "I am willing to pardon the first one to tell me the truth and nothing but the truth. I have a royal pardon with me, signed and sealed by the prince himself. I had hoped to not use it, but you left me no choice. Speak now, or the information will be extracted from you by any means necessary. I assure you, you do not wish to learn what a Royal Marine is capable of doing to you to fulfill their mission." "I'll talk!" Tusko Hulma cried out not a moment later. "Treacherous rat! Traitor! 1,000 curses upon your house and your bloodline!" Tusko let out a throaty laugh as his compatriots glared death upon him. "I'll take your hatred and your pointless curses over the death of my house." What makes him so sure that the truth will spill the end of their houses? Clara asked herself as Cynthia took Milcady's side. The Royal Marine was ready to interrogate Tusko and anyone else at the word of the veteran commander should they not comply. "Speak," came her order. Her heart was beating fast. Dread and horror mixed with anger, outrage, and disbelief to create something she had no words for. She turned to the screen again, wishing she hadn't done so, for she saw 2 medics extracting samples from barely living subjects. "Speak!" she commanded firmly, turning to face Tusko Hulma. Falling to his knees, the head of House Hulma threw away all sense of dignity as he began to talk, his eyes set upon the princess. The other nobles wanted to talk, interject, or beat the man to death, but 4 Royal Marines with their rifles trained upon them prevented them from doing anything of the sort. Tusko Hulma would be heard, and only after they would be allowed to counter anything he confessed to. "My princess, I am but your humblest servant and a loyal son of the Principality. Trust me when I say that House Hulma has done everything in our power to prevent that from spreading across the Principality without control. We have been your staunch guardians, holding back the horror of this plague unleashed not by human hands," Tusko began, groveling shamelessly. "Everything in your power?" Clara asked, as the tremor of a scream tickled her vocal cords. Barely contained from being unleashed, she pointed at the scream with a shaky arm. "Gunning and burning down your subjects is all your power can do. Cities burned, villages wasted, and settlements devastated. This has been going on for years, hasn't it? How many people have died so far? Why have you not asked for help or reported such an outbreak?" Tusko lowered himself even more, but he couldn't contain a scoff from escaping his lips. "My beloved and benevolent princess, you must understand, to have such an outbreak and be unable to contain it. My house would be shamed beyond belief. The blow to our status alone would put at risk our hold on our territories. We couldn't rely on anyone but ourselves. We tried to contain the outbreak, but by the time it began, it was already too late. That we managed to stop the spread at all should be praised, not scorned." Clara turned her gaze away in disgust and found the screen yet again. Her stomach was begging her for release, but her agitated mind would have none of it. Not yet, at least. A daughter shook her grandfather, trying to get a reaction from the corpse. Grown men crying from the pain the pustules caused them. People begging for death and even kneeling before the hazmat-wearing soldiers, more than willing to let their agony end swiftly. A mother strangling her baby to save it from such a fate. "How did this happen?" she asked again. "You said this plague was not made by human hands. Who attacked us?" "The Drazen, the Yakanti, another alien power. We are not sure, but my medics have determined that the plague is—" "Don't try to shift the blame for your negligence, Tusko," Gawain interjected, his face red with rage. "It was your house's ventures that blinded us with profit, acclaim, and affluence. If my house is to be doomed to irrelevance and chastisement, then I'll ensure your house will be dragged alongside ours," he exclaimed and pointed a finger at the Hulma head. "That treacherous, opportunistic mongrel found a great mineral deposit in Hagstall, the world where this madness began. Rich deposits of iridium and palladium gave way to an unprecedented economic boon for House Hulma, but they lacked the machinery and the haulers to make their mining efforts count quickly. They came to us. House Everblade contributed with machinery and specialized equipment, whilst House Akulata contributed numerous freighters and haulers," Natinza Everblade continued. "Industry expanded on Hagstall at a rapid pace as further deposits of more precious metals, ores, and jewels were discovered and mined. The planet Hagstall, once viewed as a mere colony world with little to offer, was suddenly transformed into a rich mining world." Redford's face paled, and he took a step back. "You devastated the world without any sort of regulation. All of you, in your greed, ransacked the entire planet," he concluded. For Clara, it was equally abominable. Habitable worlds were precious, and while vast stations habitats, domed cities, subterranean settlements, and other artificial constructs could offer housing, livable planets gave ample space, continuous resources, and a self-sufficient environment where countless commoners could live and work for millennia to come. What these houses had done was illegal since the foundation of the Principality. Many houses prized their worlds highly and maintained control over their population, expansion, and ecological impact so as not to render said worlds into barren wastelands. But Hagstall had one terrible secret. Tusko, caught in between his two fellow househeads, continued. The planet had always been sparsely populated. The soil was not good for agriculture. The fauna and flora there were largely inedible and carried large amounts of viruses and bacteria. My princess, we did not know that a pathogen could infect humans so viciously. By the time we realized what was happening, the infection was not only rampant in Hagstall, but it had spread to other neighboring worlds through the dirty hands of merchant and traveling commoners. Peshmir, Tukala, Barracuda, and Kion Kal were infected in short order, and we had no choice but to quarantine the systems, blockading them entirely to prevent further spread. But even then, 2 more worlds were infected, and with them, the stations spread across their systems. Fortunately, the leading houses of said worlds, here present, managed to evacuate the planets before the infection grew out of control, Natinza said, smiling back at her entourage and banner houses. The reason why our tithe has been affected is because we've spent our personal resources in containing the outbreak and purging those worlds so they may be settled again, Gawain explained. Clemency, Your Majesty, I implore you. I wasn't thinking when I made that order. I would never dare raise a hand against House Aster. Clara didn't hear his plea. Instead, her attention had shifted again to the screen and the parade of gruesome, grotesque death on display. Since the black box arrived in Redford's hands, it had not stopped showing dozens upon dozens of different images, video footage, and recordings of the tragedy. As she stared at the screen, a noise erupted from the speakers. It was garbled and barely audible, but everyone heard the unknown voice. It is a nightmare. I lost my state, my villa, and my vineyard in Kion Kal, all thanks to this wretched plague. You've been studying it since the first cases began on Hagstall, yes? People are dying in droves, and you worry about your damn state? That was the voice of the late Itagal Vintha. Yes, a tragedy. Now what can you tell me about this plague? I've only seen images and recordings. Is it truly that bad? That you ask such a question? Never mind. In short, yes, it is that bad. It is as if the horrid smallpox was reborn on Hagstall to assail humanity once again. Smallpox? What's that? When humanity was bound on Earth, There were many plagues, diseases, and sickness that assailed our species, but none was as terrible and recurrent as the dreaded smallpox. If you were unlucky enough to contract it, then you could end up disfigured, blind, infertile, or just die from it. Not one civilization on old Earth was spared from its wrath, and the death toll could not be counted. Gruesome, the voice countered with disinterest. So how do we treat this plague? It has been 4 years since the outbreak began, and 7 since the first cases were detected? A disease like that doesn't happen without intent, right? Did the Arabians or some rebels create it? Nature created it thanks to our unbound greed and stupidity. What happened in Hagstall was a horror story made reality. The planet was already exceptionally virulent, but otherwise mostly harmless to humans. But evolution is an uncaring mother, after all, and the cruelest artist there is. I still don't know how it happened. But this plague, stupidly named Hagstall sickness, is an abomination of nature that jumped not only the species barrier, but entire evolutionary trees. If spite was a disease, this would be it. What can be done then? Again, the voice asked with disinterest. How long before we can develop a cure? If we don't hurry and get production back in line, we'll be visited by a representative of House Astor asking why our tithes have not met the minimum amount for the 5th consecutive year. And I would rather not face such an inquiry. Not to mention that I would really like to recover my villa at the very least. A moment of silence passed, and then he spoke again. Why not just torch the infected? I may not be a scientist or biologist, but I know that infections can't survive fire. We may be out of options other than that, but I'm astonished by your boundless empathy, Idigal said with thick sarcasm. The problem lies in the long incubation period of the disease, 90 days. For 90 days, a human can be a carrier before the symptoms start manifesting. So far, it has proven to be 90% fatal, and the survivors wish for death. Prince, forgive us, but we must act quickly, or it could spread across the principality, or worse, beyond. Surely a medicine or something of the sort is being produced. I refuse to believe a mere virus can beat our medical technology in the long run. Perhaps not, but the virus mutates at a staggering pace. By the time we have a vaccine ready, it is useless for mass production and application. So far, we've managed to reduce the fatality rate to 50%, but it is not enough. This tiny monster can transfer through contact, fluids, water, and air, and we helped create it. With that, the recording ended. You fled and left your subjects to die? Clara's question cut through the silence like a hot knife through butter. Huh? Tusco muttered stupidly. My princess, we had no other choice. The reputation and honor of our houses were in danger. If we fell, who could contain this outbreak? He reasoned. We may not earn your gratitude, your majesty, but I can assure you that the tithe will be paid soon. Everything owed shall be accounted for. We just need more time to cleanse the infected worlds and gather a new working force. Our mistake was to push too many commoners at once and extend their working hours to maximize our resource output. It shall not be repeated. Upon House Hulma's name, I swear to you, we shan't fail his venerable and most benevolent majesty, the prince. Clara's jaw opened, trying to formulate a word, any word to reply to his statement, but none came out. Her heart was racing hard and fast. She could hear it pumping against her ears, and the fire in her belly was now an inferno. You think I care about mere credits? She shouted, finding her voice amidst the turmoil inside her heart. All the nobles present looked confused by her question. They couldn't comprehend why she would care about anything else. You destroyed a world, sparked the spread of an unknown plague, kept it a secret for years upon years, and you betrayed your subjects, fleeing like cowards while they died like that, she screamed, pointing at the screen. How can you talk about profits and honor and the legacy of your houses when people are dying and the principality is at risk for something you caused? How many people have died so far? How many? Silence reigned for what felt like an eternity, and only the ragged breathing of the princess pierced through until Tusco answered. Your Majesty, why do you care? He asked, genuinely puzzled. They're just commoners. Their lives are expendable and of little value. They can be replaced. Our noble and royal blood cannot. They don't matter as long as those truly deserving prosper. Nobles lead, commoners obey. That is the imperative of the principality. What does it matter if a few commoners die for their betters? Clara's eyes widened, and the world around her became white noise. Tusko Hulma had spat at her face her own words without him knowing it. Why did she care? She had never cared about the commoners before. They were just there, like always, ready to serve the principality and the nobles above them. She was of royal blood. She was an Astor, a princess. Better, beautiful, wealthier, educated. They were all beneath her. To get a glance from her was a privilege. "How many have died?" she asked softly. "According to our last estimations, 5.7 billion commoners. Among the casualties are also included at least 100 lesser houses and 2 minor houses that refused to evacuate," Natinza replied solemnly. "A tragedy that so much noble blood was lost." Clara stared with her vibrant purple eyes at the nobles and saw herself reflected in them. Her heart was racing, her muscles ached, her lungs burned, and her senses were in complete disarray. That day, Clara Astor discovered what hatred felt like. "Kill them," she whispered. "Clara?" Redford asked, having heard the command of the girls he loved as a niece. But when she turned to face him, he took a step back in shock. She was crying. Her expression was twisted and furious, and her fists were clenched, her royal blood dripping onto the floor. "Kill them! Kill them all!" Clara cried out. The nobles who were the source of her hatred were too stunned to protest. "All of them! The ones here, their families, their branching bloodlines, from the oldest to the youngest. I want them all dead." "Clara, please, calm." Redford tried to contain the fury of the raging princess, but it was for naught. With a motion of her hand, she ordered him to remain silent, and so he did out of instinct and training. "In my name and under the authority bestowed upon me by my father, the prince, I, Clara Astor, hereby order the immediate death of every member of House Hulma, House Everblade, House Aculata, and their associated vassal and banner houses. I hereby declare a purge of these houses and declare them sworn traitors and enemies of the Astorian Principality. My order is to be carried out immediately." "You can't do that," Gawain protested. "You are but a mere child. You have no author." His words died in his throat as his head was divorced from his neck. "Father!" a voice cried out. Defend yourselves or die! Please, I don't want to die!" "Mercy! Mercy!" The gathered nobles began to cry out. Some, the boldest among them, charged at the Royal Marines only to be cut down with laughable ease. Those who begged for mercy or were too busy soiling their pants were slaughtered without remorse one by the hands and sword of the young Cynthia Winfield. Even the guards found no mercy in her blue, cold eyes. While Cynthia butchered the rest of the nobles present and the screams of pain and supplications for clemency died out one by one, Clara stared down at a shaking, crying Tusko. "We'll fix your mistake," she declared in no uncertain terms. "For all the lives you squandered, for all the mere commoners." She spat the words, hating them with the same intensity she hated the man trembling in fear before her. "You recklessly abandoned and purposefully left to die. I shall ensure the legacy of your house prevails throughout the ages. While the rest shall be expunged and their records erased, your house shall live in infamy forevermore. From now on, this plague shall be known as the Hulma smallpox," she said, and then grabbed the man's throat. "Long may it be remembered," she said, and with a powerful push that her otherwise frail frame should not have, she sent Tusko Hulma back a few meters, only for him to be decapitated by her bodyguard, who was now drenched in blood. Her black armor couldn't be seen under the gore and viscera that marked her gruesome task. The room fell into silence again, and Clara stared at the screen for several minutes, taking in every detail until it finally ended, with a simple message from Itagal Vinta saying he was sorry for being a coward, and hoping the information reached Commander Redford Kalen's hands in time before he was killed. In the end, Itagal died, but his message and the evidence were conveyed. With a heavy sigh, Clara turned to Redford, feeling beyond drained emotionally, physically, and psychologically. But she was not done yet. "Find every last member of their houses, all of them. Not one shall be spared. Send assassination orders throughout their territories. Anyone sheltering survivors shall also be executed. Put bounties on their heads. Ensure every single last one of them is dead. I don't care if they're babies or still in the womb. None shall be pardoned. Not a single one. Oh, and make sure every other neighboring house knows what happened here. I will not allow another travesty like this one to happen if I can prevent it. Am I understood, Commander? Yes, my princess, Redford replied, for he had nothing else to say. Then, as if someone had flipped a switch, Clara fell to her knees and began to cry. The commander approached calmly and kneeled down, embracing her. Her arms wrapped around his neck, and she cried into his shoulder. She cried and cried until she lost consciousness. But not once did she regret her decision, and she vowed she'd become a princess worthy of the principality, not just another petulant noble. Noir Navio, Clara's quarters, 1 hour before departure from the Lagrange 5 anchorage. And that, my dear Wyatt, is the reason why I am so hated and despised. Why I am known as Clara the Reaper and my dear Cynthia is the Bloodrend. Clara finished her story and sipped from her juice. She preferred tea, but juice, no matter what type, always relaxed her for some strange reason. Across her table sat Wyatt Staples, who was, to her surprise, showing not a single ounce of disgust or derision directed at her. I see, was his reply before he too drank generously from his glass of juice. I never heard about anything like that happening. It was decided that the major incident would be sealed away. Efforts have been made to reclaim those systems, but to this day, the planets Tukala and Barracuda are quarantined. There are still survivors, and they are being hunted down. The Hulma smallpox is insidious, and one could be forgiven for thinking it was tailor-made to be extremely lethal to humans. The survivors are carriers for life, much to our dismay, and easy to propagate and spread. A full extermination of this terrible disease is the only viable solution at hand. Hagstall was bombarded with antimatter warheads. The risk of something like the Hulma smallpox being born there was too great to even consider resettlement at some point. In the end, 6 billion people died of it. 6 billion, she said with contempt and closed her eyes. Clara, I don't understand why and Cynthia are hated. You killing those nobles seemed to me like justice for all the lives they ended through their actions, Wyatt said. Wyatt, Clara extinguished 3 great houses and 18 minor houses with but a command. In less than 2 weeks, every last member of those houses were dead. Some even turned into pirates. Rather, they tried to. But nobles aren't loved by pirates, and they finished those that tried to escape, Cynthia replied before taking a large gulp from her glass. The other houses cared not for the charges. They only saw a royal purging the nobles who had displeased her and her bodyguard who carried out her orders. After that, I immersed myself in my studies more than ever. I saw the error of my ways. I was once a stupid, self-centered blue blood. I like to believe I'm no longer that foolish girl. Do you know what nobles lead, commoners obey truly means, Wyatt? Clara asked, curious to hear the sincere but mundane answer of her endearing friend. Wyatt thought for a moment before giving his answer. It means that nobles know what's best and that we commoners should listen? Clara giggled upon hearing his answer, and Cynthia chuckled. No, Wyatt, far from it. It is something that most nobles have forgotten or twisted to fit their needs. Then what does it mean? Wyatt asked, confused. That's something I like so much about you, Wyatt. You are honest and sincere, straightforward in everything you do, and yet, at the same time, you can be deceiving, and very few could tell the difference. Even for me, it's hard to read you correctly, Clara thought, amused. It means that nobles should do what's best for everyone, and in turn, commoners are to support those decisions. Everyone can interpret it differently. Personally, I see it as a symbiotic relationship. Commoners work as the backbone of the principality and support their noble leaders. In contrast, nobles should support and provide for the commoners, guiding and utilizing the resources gathered for a greater purpose. Pfft! Wyatt choked on his juice as he tried not to laugh in her face. Sorry. Is my view truly that outlandish? Clara asked with a cheeky smirk. From my experience, yes. Volantis doesn't have so bad, but from early on we're taught that a commoner must never disobey a noble and always show them respect. We are taught how to work, do things, and learn. The better we do in our lessons, then the more we can learn and do, but a commoner will always be inferior to a noble. Wyatt replied with a sad smile. The system has worked for millennia, so it must be correct. It shouldn't need to be so rigid and stagnant, Clara replied. then took a sip from her juice. That aside, you are still on time to leave the Nornavio, Wyatt. I won't force you to stay at my side now that you know being near me is paramount to a stain in your standing among other houses. One by one, my maids and ladies-in-waiting left my side, terrified to displease me and incur the destruction of their houses. I am feared and respected in equal measure, but never welcomed with open arms except by those closest to me. I'm not leaving, Wyatt replied in a serious tone. What do I have to lose if I stand at your side? Honor? Dignity? Respect? Those things are worthless to me. Standing? I have none to speak for, not I care for it. Influence or glory? Again, worthless to me. I shall do my duty and do as you command, Clara. You're my princess, my friend, and that is more valuable to me than the opinion of some nobles I've never met. Clara smiled at his answer. Then it is settled. Oh, I will have to order the chefs to bake more sweets just for you. Wyatt returned the smile. Now that I do care about. And thus, every pastry in the principality is in peril. Fear the glutton duo, Cynthia jested. Wyatt let out a laugh while Clara blushed. Shush you.